Can a scholarship change the world? A wise man once said,
"One of the ways to make the world a better place is to have more smarter, energetic people in it."
20 years ago, the Gates Cambridge Scholarship was created to bring the smartest, most energetic graduates to Cambridge, help them become leaders so they can improve the lives of people everywhere and make their voices count. Voices that are passionate, voices that are intelligent, voices that are helping people across the world.
I study how the brain rebuilds itself, but a flash of inspiration led me to building my own startup. By recycling fast fashion, this product could help millions of women living in poverty.
As an intensive care paediatrician, I've been working in the hospital and the lab throughout the pandemic. My research will help improve our understanding of infections such as pneumonia and COVID-19.
Since Cambridge, I've worked with aid agencies, charities, and NGOs. But now, I'm helping get answers for civilians killed in drone strikes.
Across 31 unique colleges, we reflect a diverse and complicated world. We're poets, politicians, performers, even professors. We come from all walks of life with our own stories to tell.
Losing my grandmother to pancreatic cancer made me want to fight it. And my work with nanoparticles could unlock new answers.
I grew up in a culture where women and girls are expected to endure domestic abuse in complete silence. As a journalist and now scholar, my writing is making sure stories like these do not go untold.
Our backgrounds may be worlds apart, but being a Gates Scholar, that's what binds us together. We're a growing global community, nearly 2,000 strong, tackling the problems that concern the many and the few. Can a scholarship change the world? Well, what do you think?
Can a scholarship change the world? It's a crucial question for us at an institution whose entire mission is to contribute to society through the pursuit of education, learning, and research. I'm delighted that today I'm in the Senate House, the heart of the University of Cambridge. Unfortunately, Melinda French Gates cannot be with us today, but we're honored to welcome Dr. Anita Zaidi, President of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's Gender Equality Division. Anita oversees the Foundation's incredible work driving gender equality and women's economic empowerment and leadership. She's at the forefront of measures to remove barriers and enable women and girls the world over to thrive. As we celebrate 20 years of the Gates Cambridge Scholarship Program, Anita and I are joined by three brilliant scholars. Sharmila Parmanand and Shadrach Frimpong are here with me, while Tara Cookson will join us via the wonders of technology. Together, we will demonstrate the power of education, learning, and research in combination with dedication and determination to make a genuine difference across our societies. Shortly, we'll present a message from Bill Gates, co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But first, I welcome Professor Barry Everett, who's had a long and distinguished career as a neuroscientist and who's been the provost of the Gates Cambridge Trust since 2013. Barry, tell us about the Gates Cambridge program. What makes it so unique?
Well, I believe the most important thing that makes the program special is the way in which it was set up and inspired directly by Bill Gates Sr. He set out the principles that have governed the application process for more than 20 years, that those awarded the scholarship must be academically exceptional, that they must show a commitment to improving the lives of others, and must have the capacity for leadership. Bill Gates Sr. was a man of great compassion and great strength of character. He defined these parameters and ensured they were written into the trust deed.
Really, it's a great story about Bill Gates Sr. And our Gates scholars, nearly 2,000 of them now, have consistently showed commitment to those values. They really do go out and make the world a better place, don't they, Barry?
Absolutely they do. But first, the scholarship enables them to achieve their academic goals, free of financial worries. This is critical, as their Cambridge degrees are an important passport to their futures. Our scholars come from all over the world, and the scholarship not only covers their fees and a generous living allowance, but also flights, visas, child support, maternity and parental leave, and also NHS charges.
And I believe that that's somewhat unusual, perhaps even unique. Certainly it renders the program attractive to students from all over the world, including those with families who are sometimes financially excluded from other scholarship programs.
Indeed it does, and this year we'll soon have 14 scholars in residence with families. But the Gates Cambridge Scholarship Programme is about more than funding and learning. It also enables students to become part of a network of brilliant minds. Our scholars join the college system, and this enables them to gain close, cross-disciplinary connections and friendships. And of course, the Gates Scholar community itself is vibrant, diverse, and dedicated to improving lives, and this too is funded by the Trust. It's a great source of creativity with enormous opportunities to share ideas and learn from each other.
It must be really quite a rewarding experience to head up a program like this, Barry. Are there things, though, that you would change?
Well, we have around 6,000 applicants every year for 85 places or so. There's always a long reserve list, a great many supremely qualified applicants to whom we simply can't offer a place. It would be wonderful to be able to accept more students. And despite having admitted students from 111 countries or so, there are still places where we aren't yet reaching enough potential scholars. For example, we would love to welcome more students from African countries, South America, the Caribbean, and the Middle East. But we continually work to ensure that everyone with the right talent and ambition knows that they're welcome to apply.
Well, it really is quite a wonderful program, which I've seen in operation myself. It's truly life-changing. Thank you very much, Barry. This program doesn't only change the lives of scholars, but it changes thousands, perhaps millions of lives as they pay forward their experience. We're extremely proud to have been chosen by the Gates Foundation to partner with them on such an exceptional scholarship program. We'll soon commence our conversation. But first, a message from Bill Gates.
Hello, everyone. Congratulations on your 20th anniversary. When we originally funded the Gates Scholarship in 2000, we wanted it to help exceptional students from all over the world experience Cambridge's 900-year legacy of higher education, learn from each other, and prepare to be global leaders. 20 years later, Melinda and I are so happy to see that this scholarship has reached more than 1,800 students from 111 different countries. The alumni of the program have gone on to remarkable careers in fields ranging from public health to international relations, chemistry, to information technology and oceanography, to neuroscience. All over the world, former Gates Cambridge scholars are now fighting for human rights, working to defeat COVID, and creating sustainable solutions to avoid climate change in their communities. We couldn't be prouder of the difference they're making and the leaders they've become. This is also a bittersweet moment for us because my dad, Bill Gates Sr., is no longer here to join us. He dearly loved this university and this program, and once said that of all the grants we ever made, this was his favorite. When someone once asked him if anything ever made him speechless, he said, "My trips to Cambridge to meet the Gates Cambridge scholars." My dad went to college thanks to the GI Bill, so he knew firsthand and spoke often about how scholarships open doors and change lives. He was always very serious about the power of learning and new ideas and the importance of engaging people with diverse interests and backgrounds. And he was passionate about service and giving back to those in need. His wisdom, empathy, generosity, and compassion had a huge influence, not just on me, my siblings, and Melinda, but on people all over the world. He shaped the creation of our foundation. Its fundamental values, that every life is important and helping others in need is the most noble calling we can undertake, came from him. Even though he's no longer with us, our foundation remains imbued with his spirit, and he lives on here too. The Gates Cambridge Scholarship Program is an embodiment of his most cherished beliefs, that given the opportunity, human beings will come together, solve the biggest challenges we face, and make the world a better and more humane place for everyone. Thank you for keeping this program thriving, even during the terrible pandemic. And thanks for inviting me to say a few words today. And congratulations to all the Gates Cambridge Scholars on your accomplishments. Go forth in service, go change the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. We'll shortly hear from 4 people who really are changing the world. We're going to discuss closing the gender gap. The gender gap, what does that mean? The World Economic Forum defines the gender gap as the difference between women and men as reflected in social, political, intellectual, cultural, or economic attainments or attitudes. That difference is there in education, in employment opportunities, in earnings, and in health. It's there in violence and victimization. It's there from the moment we're born to the moment we die. On the 30th of March this year, the World Economic Forum published its annual Gender Gap Report, and it makes for sobering reading. The pre-pandemic edition suggested it would take just under 100 years to close the global gender gap. This new report suggests that the gap has widened by an entire generation. If current trends continue, it will take more than 135 years to close the chasm that cuts through every aspect of our society. The gender gap. It's not a catchphrase. It's not a matter of political correctness. It's an abyss that separates millions of women from the opportunities that would enable them to lift themselves, their families, and their communities out of poverty. The past 15 months have laid bare the structural barriers to women's achievement. More women have been unable to work in paid employment. More women have had to take on caregiving roles with no support. More women have suffered from domestic violence and abuse. While 1.2 billion, yes, billion children have missed out on at least some schooling, it's estimated that some 24 million girls will never return to school. Before the pandemic, 130 million girls the world over were missing out on even basic school education. Without school to go to, more girls, children, have been married. And these are not only women's issues. The ability of women to study, to learn, to work, to own businesses, to teach and help their own children, to have the time to think and create and achieve, these matter to all of us. The ability of women to choose their own paths, it improves us all. The ability of women to be equal to men, it lifts us all. As we emerge from the pandemic, it's time to think about what we've learned and to use those lessons to remodel our societies. We must take this opportunity to reflect on closing the gender gap and how to reduce the number of years it will take. There aren't any easy solutions. Our world is profoundly complex, our communities many, and our challenges myriad. Joining me today are 4 wonderful panelists who are at the forefront of addressing the gender gap and finding the solutions we need. Sharmila Parmanand is a teaching fellow in gender and human rights at the London School of Economics and program officer for women, work, and migration in Asia at the Global Alliance Against Traffic in Women. Shadrach Frimpong is a current Gates Cambridge Scholar and PhD student who founded a school and health center for girls in his home community in Ghana. Joining us from her home in rural Canada, Tara Cookson is a scholar and activist, co-founder of research and advocacy group Ladysmith, and assistant professor of gender and development at the University of British Columbia's School of Public Policy and Global Affairs. And Anita Zaidi, currently in Pakistan, is the president of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's Gender Equality Division. She's also the director of vaccine development, surveillance, and enteric and diarrheal diseases programs. Well, that's a huge remit, Anita. Thank you so much for joining us today. I understand that the Gates Foundation has completed research showing how women's employment has been affected by the pandemic. Could you tell us more about that?
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic has taken a terrible toll on women's employment. In fact, I would say that it's unraveled progress that we've made for women's employment, or that women have made in the last 2 decades, in that what was a positive trajectory in reduction of poverty of about 2.7% over a 2-year period, let's say 2019 to 2021, if we look at that period, we were expecting poverty to go down in women. Poverty is sexist. We know that already. That was true even before the pandemic. And now we expect the poverty in women in this from 2019 to 2021 is actually going to increase by 9%. And that, if I estimate how many women that is, it's almost 50 million women, bigger than the population of Spain. And we've done a sort of global analysis for like is this a few countries? Is this many countries? And the data shows that women everywhere are affected. And the reason is there are several reasons. The most important one is that most of the sectoral impacts of COVID-19 on the types of jobs that women do are actually very they're not gender neutral. So the impact is mainly on the professions that women are mostly employed in, such as retail industry, tourism, informal work, part-time work, caring professions, childcare centers, schools. Although in the rich world, there have been unemployment benefits. I mean, this because a lot of the women's employment is informal in developing countries. Women have just been left out of stimulus responses by governments. The other reason is that because women are doing informal work, and if they own businesses, they're small businesses, they find it very difficult to access capital markets and loans, and so the business may be too small to qualify for a government loan or something. So the impact is just massive, and we have to, in our planning for economic recovery, keep this center front and center to see how do we mitigate so that we don't slide off as badly as we have in these 2-3 years.
Thanks, Anita. It's obviously very concerning. Tara, you too have seen, I think, how women's lives have been affected by the crisis and the work you're trying to ensure that caregiving is valued. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. So we, hear a lot about how female labor force participation has declined also because unpaid care work has increased. And it's not because women have to care for their children or their elder parents that they're, being pushed out of the labor force. It's actually because governments and employers in the private sector don't do enough to support paid and unpaid care work. And I'm working at the moment on a research project with UN Women and the International Labor Organization, examining the extent to which national social protection systems are gender responsive. So we're looking at the whole web of policies and programs and services that governments provide to prevent people from being pushed into poverty and also to support them to lead lives of health and dignity. And while we see plenty of recognition of gender and other inequalities, we see really little action to address these. For example, through investments in quality public childcare and elder care, or family leave and unemployment benefits that enable individuals and families to take time off to care for loved ones and make it through a crisis. And at the same time, we do have some countries that are showing us that another way is possible. So Uruguay and Cabo Verde, for example, have developed these really incredible and innovative care strategies and care policies, laying out concrete steps and investments in the care economy. And it's this kind of sort of systems thinking that's really needed to ensure that women and men both can work for pay and give and receive high quality care.
It's great to have those concrete examples of things that can happen and in fact are happening. Tara's just told us that the pandemic is clearly increasing women's childcare responsibilities, which has directly affected their ability to work, contribute to an increase in poverty. Anita, what do you think we can do about that?
Yeah, so I will build on what Tara just said. I completely agree with the comments that she made. We have to think of childcare as essential infrastructure, the same way that we think about roads and bridges and telecom sector. And if we can do that, the benefits of this, in fact, many countries are now figuring out a cost benefit ratio, and it's cost neutral, but at the same time has the potential of increasing female employment, since most of the people who will work in the childcare sector will be women. It allows other women to work in the way that they want and participate in the economy. And it also has this impact, and we're seeing some data coming out from Kenya, Nairobi, for example, of keeping, because a lot of the childcare responsibility, if a woman has to provide for her family, falls on the older adolescent girls who then are kept out of school. And by having a good childcare, you can also indirectly benefit older girls from leaving schooling to take care of their younger siblings. So I call it a triple whammy positive effect. And it's actually incredible that we have not made these kinds of investments. So when people think about taking World Bank loans and things, they think about taking money for infrastructure such as roads and things, and for economic prosperity, but they don't think that having childcare provision could lead to economic prosperity. And we need to change minds about that and actually do the policy work and the evidence show how this can benefit every country around the world.
It's a great example of the complex interplay around these issues. Shadrach, one of the clear ways that people can escape from poverty is education. Why is girls' education so important, and what inspired you and your community to found a school for girls?
Well, thanks, Steve. I always say that if the data is not enough, maybe sometimes, who knows, maybe anecdotes may be helpful. So, of course, the data around the importance of child education is, vast and quite numerous already out there. But, as a brother to four incredible young girls and women, I think I've been able to just catch a little bit of a glimpse into some of these realities. My two older sisters could not have the chance of attaining an education. Obviously, at the time, my family had financial situations and all of that. But when I look at the reality of my two older sisters and then my two younger sisters who had education, the difference is so clear. It's just so telling that you cannot just look at that and say, wait, this is not real, right? And again, even taking a step back down further, for me on the personal side, when I was in elementary school, and I know there are people who are watching this and probably be surprised because, they're like, Shadrach, you've gone to all these Ivy League schools, 3 Ivy League degrees, and you're getting a doctorate in Cambridge. You must be freaking smart all your life. Far from it, right? When I was in elementary school, I always placed third. This is growing up in the village. Well, you guess the two people that always taught me, they were all women. They were young girls. The person that always placed first was my cousin Grace, called Adom. And Grace is probably watching this from, the village back in Ghana. And, if you're Grace, you're watching, hi. But you see, the reality is that I get a chance to get all this education, go all the way to the University of Pennsylvania, right? And I'm graduating, fortunate to get a President's Engagement Prize, $150,000. Think of something to do. Call my mom. What can we do? And he said, well, your cousin Grace, she always beat you in class. She's back in the village. She has kids now. Well, this is a chance for us to do something. And in the moment, of course, we all go through life and we all have our plans. But in that very moment, for me, it was a reckoning. It was like that clarion call. No, you have to turn back. And I tend to think for myself, if I could go that far, being the person that placed third, what if? What if she had a chance to? What if my two older sisters had a chance to? And so for us, that was the impetus. It was a drive that pushed us to go back and create, the opportunities now we've been able to create, making sure that 240 girls, as I speak to you, through community efforts with the organization, we've been able to ensure that they're receiving tuition-free education.
It just shows that, the heart is not disconnected from the head around these issues. The personal experience is so relevant to why it matters globally. I think we should have a shout out to Ghana and to Shadrach's Village. Sharmila, you work with the Global Alliance Against Traffic in Women, trying to help some of the most disadvantaged and indeed powerless women in the world. So tell us a little bit about how the Alliance works and how do you help them, and also how's COVID affected the situation?
So the Global Alliance is an umbrella organization of over 80 NGOs around the world. It engages with the issue of human trafficking. So roughly that means the transport or recruitment of individuals for the purpose of exploitation. Now, anti-trafficking is a very tricky framework to work with because it can sometimes be weaponized to restrict people's movement or migration, or to restrict people from doing work that they need to do in the name of protecting them. So our engagement with it is quite strategic. Our focus is really on rights for women, migrants, and workers. Sometimes, official policies don't really line up with people's lived realities. So sometimes women are offered small loans when in fact what they actually need is better structural, and as Tara said, systemic social protection, right? Healthcare, access to education, housing for themselves and their families. Sex workers are always offered sewing machines, when in fact, a lot of them would prefer an end to the police violence against them and would prefer to be able to unionize and advocate for themselves. So at the core of our policy and research agenda is really centering the experiences and the knowledge and needs of these women as a driving force behind policy recommendations. COVID has exposed the precarity of a lot of low-wage workers, both in the formal and informal sector. So some migrant workers don't have access to social protection in their destination countries. And at the height of the pandemic, many of them, without notice, were sent back home. And obviously, this displacement makes them very economically vulnerable. So all our lobbying efforts at the moment are directed at a more equal recovery, right? So in this return to the new normal, it can't be the same old thing, right? In terms of vaccine equality, in terms of building safe and inclusive migration pathways, the priority should be building something more equal.
Sharmila, you've, in a particular context, highlighted the question of gender-based violence. Tara, comment, if you will, on what you've seen during the pandemic.
Absolutely. So early on in the pandemic, the UN Secretary General amplified the alarm bells of activists around the world when he decried a shadow pandemic of violence against women and girls. But this violence existed before the pandemic. It's just that the current policies imposed have exacerbated violence that women experience. So I work with this incredible group of scholar activists and community leaders at Ladysmith, on a gender data project at the Colombia-Venezuela border called Cosas de Mujeres. And we're working in the context of the largest humanitarian migration in contemporary history. And we're using WhatsApp to connect women to services that prevent and respond to gender-based violence. And then we use the data generated through those messages to generate resources and political will to improve the service offering. And as soon as lockdowns were imposed in Colombia and women were shut into their houses, we saw an increase in requests for help. And as Sharmila mentioned, the resources that women were needing weren't always and not often the ones on offer. So we heard lots of requests for cash transfers that would buffer the kind of impact of income loss. We heard requests for more women's shelters and for sexual and reproductive health care services to be classified as essential and kept open with extended hours. And it's investments in these kinds of things that need to endure post-COVID, so that returning to normal doesn't mean, the continued levels of violence that were there, prior to the pandemic and new patterns set.
Yeah, we don't want to have the status quo just reaffirmed again and again. So I want to shift gears a little bit. Shadrach, I know that in addition to the school that you've and the community have created, there's an associated health center. Tell us, why did you think that was so important to connect the two?
Well, great question. I think in public health, in the public health discipline, one thing we do know very well is that education is a huge social determinant of health, right? And so for us, from the very beginning, we knew that if you put up a school and you do not add the health facility, that's doing one without the other. It's like having like an incomplete circle, if you would say. So, we sat down as a community and we thought, look, in this community, we have challenges of early marriages. We have challenges of teenage pregnancy. We have challenges of particularly risky health infections. And what does the data tell us when it comes to who are the vulnerable targets of risky health infections? Falls down again to young girls. So we knew there and then that as part of the school's mission and focus, we were going to provide an education that is also connected deeply and entrenched into health. So by having the health center very close by, the students then could have access to sexual and reproductive health services, right? And when we also look at it very closely within the communities that we work in 8 communities. These communities have a lot of gold, My dad's cocoa land, oh my God, gold, okay? So, and I guess when you grow up, you think, well, this is normal, you go to farm, all of that. But before long, we were seeing an influx of people from all over the world and also from the city as well, coming into the town to mine gold illegally. It just didn't stop there. When they come, usually they take advantage of these young girls too. And so then we thought, wait, this is even more than we thought. If we want to safeguard the entire community's health, then it makes a lot of sense to do whatever we can to protect the health of the most vulnerable, which ended up being the young girls. So at the very beginning, when we set up the health facility, it was just really to provide those services to the young girls. And now, obviously, it's growing to the medical facility. It is serving almost everybody in the 8 community. I guess you could say that's a clear example of the girl effect right there.
Right.
Yeah.
The extension of the effect into the wider community. Exactly. So, of course, the most obvious health issue associated with women and the pandemic is exactly that. It's COVID-19 itself. We've seen women leaders appear to have a stronger grip on controlling the pandemic in some parts of the world. But how does it play out when it comes to treatment and vaccinations? Anita?
Yes, Stephen. So as you say, women have shown how amazingly effective they can be as leaders in the pandemic. Although you would not realize this from just looking at the media and who gets coverage in the media. So countries that have had women leaders or states that have had women leaders have tended to have better responses. We were talking earlier about, in British Columbia and Canada, where she's a local heroine, Dr. Bonnie Henry, is in charge of the COVID response and has kept BC comparatively safe compared to the many other parts of Canada. State of Kerala in India is another good example. And then also at the national level, Germany, Finland, Denmark, New Zealand have tended to have better responses and have women leaders who listen and have empathetic relationships with their population so that they can influence people's behavior. As you know, in COVID, the thing that's really made a difference is how much are people following instructions on protecting themselves against COVID exposures, the non-pharmaceutical interventions. But even on the research and development side, women have played a really effective role. So for example, the mRNA vaccines that we have right now, the Pfizer and Moderna ones, a woman a scientist by the name of Catalin Carrico has been the main behind the scenes, painstaking, decades-long work proving mRNA technology could be used in humans for delivery of vaccines and drugs and gene therapy. Many of the clinical trials that we are seeing done so quickly around the world, including the Oxford AstraZeneca trial, have been led by women, which has taken like 24/7 work. But it would be remiss of me to not say that 70% of all healthcare, of the global health force around the world, is female, even though at the top it's only 5% of women in leadership. And this is something that I think that we need to change because there is a lot of wasted talent in global health because women face so many structural barriers to be able to advance to senior leadership positions. And there's a program that I had proposed a few years ago that Melinda Gates was very excited about, and it builds on her ideas in her book, Moment of Lift, and it's called Women Lift Health. And it's a training program for mid-career women to hone their skills for how do you advance in sort of senior leadership positions, as well as addressing the systemic sort of barriers that women face in a few key organizations around the world, including in the organizations that they're working in. To overcome those barriers. So I'm very excited about it. We've had 2 cohorts so far, and this program right now is in the US, but will then become global programs. Will move to many different parts of the world.
That sounds like an exciting initiative. Thanks, Anita. Shadrach, I want to go back, if I may, to this question of girls out into the community, as you said, the difference that it can make. Tell us a little more about how you and the team engaged the community in the education and health work starting around the school and the healthcare center.
Thanks, Steve. This is a question that whenever I'm asked, I tend to think, well, okay, good. Because it's something I had to, answer myself at a certain point in my career, in my own life. Leave Ghana after high school, go overseas to study, come back, and I'm finding out, well, a lot of the narratives I had or I learned in the West, maybe by the media, are not true. Which is mainly, almost all African men are patriarchal. They're not. Okay, and when we step into the community, at least for the communities we work in, we thought that was the case. So we started doing, sort of a feasibility and acceptability study with the Wharton Social Impact Initiative at the University of Pennsylvania. And one of the remarkable things we learned was that these men will come up to us and after we asked them, why did you send your kids to school, your girls to school? And amongst the many men that walked up to us, you guessed, one of them was my dad, okay? And my dad comes up and is like, that's like Chi saying, hey, you've gone overseas to study, now you're here to tell us what to do, huh? You think we don't know what we're about? And he goes like, well, I care so much about your sisters. In fact, I cared so much about them. That's why, at that young age, when they were 4 or 5 years old, who lived in the middle of the forest, if I did not love them, did you think as a father it was right for me to allow them to walk 2 hours, 5 a.m., 6 a.m. through the forest alone to the nearest village school? And that hit me so hard because that right there underpinned the context of the importance of context, right? And for us, that was key because then we were able to learn that, wait, the men actually do care about their daughters. And so they were willing to engage. And we were able to work with them to then create, the circular model we have where, most of the people that show up on the community-run cocoa farm that we leverage to improve the educational outcomes are mostly men. Now they work with their wives to get the profits we get. And so that has been profound. Listening has been a huge thing in the work we do. The other piece is listening has also helped us to understand that, well, if you want to do public health education, in some communities, the best way to do it would be getting on the community radio at 5 a.m. In another community, you may just have to speak to the local leaders so they allow the chief linguist to beat the drums at 6 p.m. Outside of that, you're screwed. Well, I'll tell you what, Steve. In one community, we did not listen to them. They told us to do the community radio thing. We said, no, we're going to use posters. With it, they took the posters to the loo. Wasted money. So we've learned listening helps us to contextualize what we need to do in each community. And you found when you listen to people, they're effectively engaged and they take ownership of the success of the interventions. Yeah.
I have to say that for so much research, especially anything that involves communities, that listening point is absolutely central. There's no doubt about it. So this gets us to the question about how it is that we actually achieve change. And you've started to address it. Harnessing influencers who can change minds, removing structural barriers that prevent women from succeeding. Tara, let's go to you on this one. How do you convince, for example, governments to change policies? Do you have any examples of successful initiatives in that regard?
Absolutely. So we're in an era of data-driven development and evidence-based policymaking. And data and evidence can very effectively change hearts and minds. At the same time, we need to think about what counts as data and what counts as evidence. And my co-founder at Ladysmith, Lorena Fuentes, and I started the organization in response to a trend that we'd seen in each of our respective PhD research, my own as a Gates Cambridge scholar. And that was that data was being defined so narrowly that it didn't actually include women's experiences and their analyses of their own lives and what was happening to them and around them. And I noticed this in the conditional cash transfer programs that I was studying, where the official data showed that if you give a woman a cash incentive, that successfully nudges her to take her kids to school and to health clinics. But what that official data didn't show was the hours upon hours that women could walk to reach a health clinic only to find that it was closed because it was short-staffed or underfunded and she'd return again and again. And Lorena noticed in her research on femicide that official femicide statistics weren't counting the deaths of women who were in the wrong neighborhood, who had the wrong color of skin. And it didn't capture the hours that sisters and mothers and fathers and brothers spent trying to get a femicide death registered as such. So what counts as data and what counts as evidence is being contested by us, among others, and things are changing. So for example, there's this beautiful story in UN Women's recent Progress of the World's Women report about a feminist agricultural group in Brazil that's worked to get women's labor on family farms counted, including in official census data that then helps shape our understanding of what's economic productivity look like in this context. And these movements help ensure that the kind of evidence-based or data-driven picture we have is actually more accurate.
Yeah, getting the right data and getting it in front of people is really crucial here. There's so much to talk about, but it is now time to take questions from the audience. I don't want to leave them out. We have a lot of questions already. We'll get through as many as we can, but I know that we're going to run out of time, and I apologize for that. I'll get to them as quickly as possible. I think that the first question, Anita, is for you. Several audience members have asked about the quality of health services for low-income women all over the world. It's a big question, but what do you see as the biggest challenges facing women's health in terms of quality provision?
Thanks, Steve. This is a really sort of a fundamentally important question, because we have to fundamentally reimagine how the health system and the global health system is organized in low-income and low-middle-income countries, because it does not put the needs of women at the top, right? So programs are fragmented. Women have to go to 5 different places to get the healthcare that they need. Programs are vertically organized. You may have to go somewhere else for family planning, somewhere else to get your children immunized, somewhere else to get your gynecological problems addressed, somewhere else to go deliver your baby and go for antenatal care. And until we start thinking in terms of how do we serve the needs of women, we are not going to be able to have the kind of healthcare that women need, period. Okay. The other thing that is really incredibly lacking is investment in research and development for women's health needs. So, for example, in the NIH in the US, which has an annual budget of $32 billion, only 1% is spent on women's health R&D. And so there are like just really basic biology fundamental women's health issues at which we do not have answers. And so I see both on the service innovation side as well as on the R&D side huge needs that women's health need to be addressed.
Thank you.
So let me leave it at that, but I can really go on about this. I mean there is progress. We've made progress in COVID, for example, on a very simple thing, whereas pregnant women used to be left out of clinical trials, and so in an outbreak situation, they are often at very high risk of death in any outbreak, but cannot access the preventive tools. And in Ebola, as well as in COVID-19, we've been able to address that when women are included in clinical trials early on, even if they're pregnant, because of course women have brains and minds and they can consent, right? And so why would you assume that women would not want to be part of clinical trials, right? You can ask them.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we could have a whole session on just this, I'm absolutely sure. But I've got to move on. Shadrach, an audience member has commented that you already seem to have achieved so much with your community, with your past education. Why the heck do you need a PhD? Why come to Cambridge to study more?
Because why not? Well,
that's actually maybe the best answer in some ways.
Well, yeah, I mean,
education is good in and of itself.
There you go. There you go. Well, of course, you're a VC, so
I have to say that.
But here's the thing. I think education, it's a lifelong thing. And fundamentally, I love to learn. I love to learn. I've been very privileged and blessed to be on the path I am. But specifically coming to Cambridge was just me getting to the point of, the work we do in Ghana. And we realizing that, we work with 8 partner communities, close to about 10,000 people, and we thought, these people deserve more than sob stories and good intentions. I don't know who said it, but, somebody said the road to hell is paved with good intentions. When we talk about all these exciting stuff, we are also humble to acknowledge that the unintended negative consequences are not present. They are there. And how do you minimize unintended negative consequence? Go back to what Tara said, evidence-driven work. And I knew nothing about that. And when you don't know, what do? You go back to school. So I'm sorry to probably disappoint. The education might never stop. Yeah.
I think it shouldn't ever stop for any of us. Let's expand this to Sharmila and Tara as well. I'd love you to explain a little bit about the difference that your PhD and the Gates Cambridge Scholarship has made in your life and your work. Sharmila, let's start with you.
Yeah, no, it's been really life-changing. I would not have been able to access a Cambridge education otherwise. And with the support of Gates, I've been able to undertake quite an ambitious feminist participatory action research project with vulnerable female workers in the Philippines. And this is, you know, as we've been saying, requires a lot of resources. It requires immersion in the community. It requires slow research and really getting to know the meaning systems of the people in the community. So without the scholarship, that wouldn't have been possible. But that's important knowledge, right? That's beyond the surface knowledge. Gates also puts a big premium on public engagement and the public impact of our work and the knowledge that we produce. So I've really learned to communicate my work to different audiences because of the mentors that I've had and the platforms that I've been given. So it's huge, it's life-changing, and I'm pretty committed to paying that forward.
Well, you're already doing that, I think, so keep it up, keep it up. Tara, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the scholarship's many enduring gifts is that it prepared me to have challenging and solutions-oriented conversations with people who see the world very differently than I do, and to approach those conversations with a sense of curiosity and with a sense of empathy. And, you know, it started right when I arrived in Cambridge. And, you know, the questions I was asking of my research were shaped by these conversations I would have with a fellow Gates scholar who was a theologian and a priest about gender equality. And then when it came time to disseminate my research findings, I'd have these long chats with another Gates scholar, a neuroscientist, who helped me sort of communicate my policy messages in a way that was generous and enabled me to keep the conversation going, even when talking with someone with whom I was really at odds, you know, economists, for example. And this ability to have kind of generous and caring and curious conversations has enabled me to have influence in places that I wouldn't have otherwise, you know, all the way up to the United Nations. And, you know, for gender equality, it's really important to get everyone on the bus, as I like to say. And it was really my fellow Gates Cambridge scholars that taught me how to do that.
So we've heard about listening and we've heard about communicating with empathy. These are things that are not what people often think about when they think about academia, but it's so important, I think. We really have only time for one more question, I'm sorry to say. And quite a few people have asked versions of this about your hopes for the future, given that as we come out of the pandemic, we've taken some steps backwards. We've heard about that on almost every front, unfortunately. But do you remain optimistic? I'll start with you, Sharmila.
I am cautiously optimistic. I think the pandemic has exposed social inequalities that have always been there. These are not new, but they've exposed them so much that it is almost impossible to deny they exist now and kind of too hard to ignore them, right? And so they've been picked up in a way that they haven't been before. The UN, the International Labour Organization, has picked them up. So I'm hoping that's created enough traction for these conversations. Next is, you know, women have been at the forefront of mobilizations, even throughout the pandemic. We've had success stories from Argentina, from Chile, even Poland and Ireland. So I am hopeful that the world will realize we can't dismiss women's demands now, right? And we can keep building on that. So it's cautious optimism.
Thank you. How about you, Shadrach?
Very much so, Steve. I think, well, I can speak to men everywhere, but for the men in the 8 communities we work with, I think there's a gradual progression towards the asymptotes, or towards, you know, we're finding more and more people are realizing, many men are realizing that, look, we're different but equal to our women. And that in itself is shaping how, you know, a lot of the men in the community support us, you know, on the farms, the visions they have for their daughters, and even now to their sons too. So, you know, for us, that has been huge. And for me, that gives me a lot of optimism, because I always say, wherever I go to, we've spent, what, centuries trying to find a cure for HIV, Alzheimer's, you know it. Well, we'll never know. What if the cure for cancer is in the mind of a young girl in my village, right? These are the questions that, for me, you know, it's like we have to look at more. And I'm glad more and more the men that we work with are waking up to that reality too.
How about you, Tara?
You know, about 6 months ago, I turned on the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, our national radio, and I heard the panelists on one of my favorite shows, Power and Politics, talking about the care economy. And this would never have happened pre-pandemic. So the fact that feminist activists and policymakers and practitioners have managed to get issues of paid and unpaid care on the not just the national agenda, but on the global agenda, and to have people talking about it at dinner tables, that does give me, real reason for optimism.
Thank you. And Anita, if you don't mind me saying, you've been at this for longer than our other panelists. One could become a little bit jaded, I suppose. Do you retain a sense of optimism?
Very much so. So by nature, I'm an optimist and believe in human progress and human ingenuity. So I think what's going to come out of the pandemic are two things. One is the fruits of scientific endeavors are going to be accelerated for many different diseases that we have faced in the past and did not have solutions to, including HIV, TB, perhaps malaria, HPV, because HPV, we have a preventive vaccine, but that's used in adolescent women. If you already have HPV is the cause of cervical cancer, of which 90% cervical cancer is in sub-Saharan Africa. It's a tremendous gouge that people don't think about, and there is no treatment if it gets picked up late. But we may be able to address that with these nucleic acid vaccines. Through picking it up early and stimulating your own immune system. So I'm very excited about scientific possibility. All of the learning that we've had from the pandemic, sad as it is to see all of the human tragedy that has unfolded. But there is also another thing that I'm really excited about and looking forward to, which is the Generation Equality Forum. So this is an event, I would call it a once in a generation. That's why it's called Generation Equality Forum. That was supposed to happen in 2020 in Paris and got postponed because of the pandemic, and will now happen mostly virtually in end of June, early July. And this is it's a Beijing plus 25. Beijing was, remember when we had a call to action for gender equality. Hillary Clinton represented the U.S. government. This is looking at progress, but seeing like what are the commitments that the world governments, private sector, civil society need to make for gender equality to get to the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And what I'm really interested in is that they've actually got some concrete themes that have been picked up by women in a very participatory way, for which there will be accountability for how we're going to measure them and how we're going to deliver them. Economic justice and rights is one of them. Feminist leadership, how do you promote feminist leadership? Closing the digital divide. So there's a huge gap between how many women have access to cell phones and internet compared to men, and that is not closing without specific action. And there are three other important ones as well. And so what I hope is that using that fulcrum of the sort of galvanizing moment of the Generation Equality Forum, we will be able to see huge progress for women in the next 10, 15 years and accelerate the gap that you talked about at the beginning of this conversation, Stephen, on the gender gap report, right? And so if we can bridge that gap and close it not in 100 years, but in 20 years or 15 years, 10 years, that is what I am really excited about. This is why we set up the division at the Gates Foundation as a really concerted action towards gender equality. And I think having all sort of women and male allies come together to deliver on this will be something fantastic to see, and I'm very positive about.
Well, I'm delighted that we are ending our part here on at least a cautiously optimistic note, Sharmila. But unfortunately, we've run out of time. We could go on for another couple of hours, I'm sure. But thank you so much for your contributions, your thoughtful, stimulating questions. I wish we could address more of them. Anita, thank you for joining us at such short notice, contributing your experience, your wisdom, your evident passion for gender equality. Tara, Shadrach, Sharmila, we're so grateful for your enthusiasm, your ideas, your thoughts, and the hard work that you're putting into this. It's really inspirational to know that there are such people as all of you addressing the challenges of our world, solving some of those challenges. And I think that you embody everything that the Gates Cambridge program stands for. So thank you to our audience. Thank you for joining us today. Finally, our deep gratitude to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Because of your endowment of this program and because of Bill Sr.'s foresight, Gates Cambridge scholars will continue to study at Cambridge and to go forth and tackle the world's greatest challenges for decades to come. In fact, just today we heard that Gates Cambridge alumna Kayla Barron will be the first Gates scholar in space when she travels as mission specialist to the International Space Station later this year. By allowing Gates Cambridge scholars to reach their full potential, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation enables them to make the world a better place. We close with a film testifying to the power of the Gates Cambridge Scholarship Program. Thanks.
For as long as I've known, my commitment to public service has always been my driving force, and so I count myself lucky. I come from a very matriarchal family, but as a public international lawyer, I work in areas where women and girls are often sidelined. As a young African girl growing up in 3 continents, I understood the importance of human mobility across borders as well as within them. But while working with the UN in Sudan, South Sudan, and Somalia, there was always something I noticed. When nations clash over borders, cross-border communities fare the worst, and it's women and children who are most affected. I saw that these communities have legal rights that are invisible to domestic and international law. This legal gap is why I became a Gates Cambridge scholar. Because Indigenous people make up nearly 370 million people across the world. Because international borders affect transboundary communities from the Irish border to Kurdistan and Kashmir. During my PhD, I've identified this glaring gap in domestic and international law. And now the real work begins. One border, one transboundary community, or one family at a time. This is the difference a Gates Cambridge scholar can make. Leading a life that's bigger than ourselves, using the knowledge we gain to challenge the very assumptions on which this world is built, aiming high and achieving even higher. This is what it means to be a Gates Cambridge scholar. Whether it's developing treatments for cancers, delivering vaccines at the touch of a finger, tackling fast fashion, period poverty, or both together, understanding our place within the world, or even out of it. Every year, this unique scholarship transforms the lives of 80 of the world's most talented minds, who go back into the world to improve the lives of millions. It's why someone like me is speaking with you today. And it's why the world needs more Gates Cambridge scholars. Because we want to share our knowledge to make an impact. Because we want to answer the difficult questions and help solve the biggest challenges. Can a scholarship change the world? I know it can.